Smallville was one of the most beloved television series that the DC Universe has ever made, and many of the decisions that were seen as controversial during its release have since aged spectacularly well. Even during the worst of Smallville's ranked seasons, the show made some daring choices with the Superman mythos that wound up being for the best. Looking back at many of the details that the show explored in unusual ways, it is surprising how well many of these choices have aged. Smallville set the template not just for Superman stories in the 21st century, but for an interconnected DC universe as a whole. While some DC characters were wasted in Smallville, many others were used with precision and contributed to the show's overall narrative. With a new Superman upcoming in the DCU and set to face many of the same challenges as his predecessors, it is especially worth looking back on Smallville and how so many of its surprising choices actually contributed to an incredible final result. 10. Writing off some of the best characters, including Lex and Lana. While the departures were hard on viewers, they were the right decision. Shockingly, the choice to have many excellent characters leave Smallville early wound up being the right one for the show. While characters like Pete Ross leaving Smallville were jarring for the cast, crew, and audience, it went to show that the series was willing to change and evolve throughout the years. This was especially true for characters like Lex and Lana, who left after season 7, allowing the show to evolve. Clark needed to work toward a relationship with Lois, as well as a direct antagonism with Lex, and neither of these could occur with the shape of the show as it was. Writing off these characters when their stories were at an end, just as with Supergirl, Doomsday, John Glover's Lionel and more leaving Smallville throughout its run, helped to make the show develop and evolve and feel more cumulative by its end as a full story. 9. Building a Superman universe rather than a DC universe. Smallville was only one show, not an entire constellation. The weight of shared universes has become an integral part of superhero storytelling, but this was not the case with Smallville, and that helped to make its story feel important unto itself. The series tried to launch some interconnected series, with Alan Ritchson being recast for an Aquaman pilot, but none of these ever went to series. These potential spin-offs could have made Smallville's story of Clark seem less important to the larger DC universe. Fortunately, Smallville remained separate, although it did seed in many DC characters throughout its run. A version of the Justice League even appeared in later seasons, although this was done in a compelling and fun way that centered around Clark's personal story. The additional characters were well done, but essentially worked as bonuses to the show, not as important figures and stories unto themselves. 8. Framing Lex Luthor as a contemporary to Clark Kent. Lex Luthor has had a number of very different incarnations. When Smallville was released, perhaps the most well-known live-action iteration of Lex Luthor was the Gene Hackman version from the Christopher Reeve films. In those movies, Luthor is a brilliant, comical, scheming crook who spends most of his time in hiding or in prison. Rather than following this track, Smallville's Luthor borrowed from some of the comics and linked Luthor's origin as a villain to Clark's youth. Making Clark and Lex friends helped to create one of the best live-action portrayals of Luthor yet. Rosenbaum's version of the character was complex and empathetic, even if the seeds of his future villainy could be seen throughout the series. Seeding the character so early in Superman's story helped to make a relatable and interesting foe that has since gone on to inspire further incarnations of the hero, including Nicholas Holt's upcoming take in Superman. 7. Bringing in rising star Jensen Ackles to distance Clark and Lana. Lana needed to have other romances if Clark was ever to be with Lois. Jensen Ackles was becoming a big name when he was brought into Smallville in Season 4 to play Lana Lang's boyfriend, Jason Teague. The character became a main character during the season, and his relationship with Lana was a focal point. Much of their dynamic went south later in the season, when Jason's more sinister motivations were made clear. Like many other performers on the show, Jensen Ackles left Smallville early due to work on Supernatural. However, the character left an enormous imprint in the show, having worked to show Lana connecting deeply with another character. While Jason was proven to be a villain, it was compelling to see Lana connecting with somebody else throughout the season, and how that would go on to push her further away from Clark and allow his relationship with Lois to bloom. 6. Bringing in Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve for cameos. The late stars of Superman had notable appearances on Smallville. Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder set the template for what a superhero movie could be with the 1978 release of Superman. In its following sequels, their relationship was a high point, with the two actors becoming highly esteemed for their respective work as Clark Kent and Lois Lane. It made sense at the time to bring the two in among other Smallville cameos for short roles in the series, with Reeve appearing in Season 3 and Kidder appearing in Season 4. These cameos were notable at the time, but they have grown even more so after the passing of their performers. Christopher Reeve passed away in 2004, with Kidder's death following some time later in 2018. This makes their Smallville appearances important and historic, as the last time that either of the two Superman stars performed in any new superhero media.